Hey, I'm Julian Sanchez, and this is your WatchCats daily news roundup for Friday, April 11th, 2025. And oh boy, do we have a lot of stories for you today. In recent days, we have repeatedly talked about news regarding DOGE's attempts to access Social Security and IRS databases, and we're starting to see some of the fruits of that access. So, lead story today is that with DOGE playing a key role in this process, the Trump administration is attempting to pressure migrants to self-deport by canceling their Social Security numbers. As we mentioned in previous roundups, non-citizens can, in the United States, obtain Social Security numbers and non-citizen Social Security cards, because as long as those people are here, we like it that they are able to pay taxes. But the new approach is going to be to begin moving migrants who are alive on the Social Security rolls to a database formerly had just been where you move people who have died to remove them from the Social Security system. The Trump administration says it will be beginning with what it calls criminals and suspected terrorists. This should send up a bit of a red flag if you have at all followed the disturbing story about mass deportations of suspected members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua to a Salvadorian prison notorious for human rights abuses. If you have tracked those stories, you will know that a lot of people flagged as gang members by the Department of Homeland Security seem to have been identified as such on extremely dubious grounds. For example, tattoos, very popular and commonplace tattoos, even though experts say Tren de Aragua does not use tattoos as an identifying mechanism. So there's a bunch of cases of people who really appear to be innocent who have been removed without due process after being mistakenly labeled as gang members. So there's not really any reason to think that the flagging as suspected terrorists, and Tren de Aragua is now designated as a terrorist organization and not just a garden variety of gang. There's no reason to believe that identification system is going to be significantly more reliable. So I think we can expect to see a lot of people identified on very tenuous grounds and removed from the Social Security rolls who are currently working and paying taxes. Another related story from NPR, DOGE staffer Antonio Gracias has apparently been making the rounds of conservative media, making claims about voter fraud using Social Security data. That is, he is claiming on conservative platforms that DOGE's analysis of Social Security databases cross-checked against voter rolls from what he calls cooperative states has turned up evidence, he claims, of non-citizens who are on the voting rolls and indeed in many cases have actually voted. This is something Republicans have claimed for a long time, that there's an epidemic of non-citizens who are voting. Most independent audits and research have shown that this is not the case in any significant way, that not that it happens 0 times anywhere ever, but that it is not a significant phenomenon that occurs frequently enough that you would have to worry about whether the results of elections are being altered. So there's really sort of 2 independent problems with this. One is a question of data access. Antonio Gracias personally is someone that DOGE has repeatedly represented to courts as someone who does not have access to personally identifiable information in Social Security databases. And even if he's not the one actually running these checks more broadly, there's this question of, hey, DOGE is an efficiency body. What is the authority by which they are accessing sensitive federal databases for the purpose of effectively ginning up support for a Republican narrative about voter fraud, which is not really related to their core mission. The second issue, of course, is there any reason to think that this is likely to be true? As you probably know, if you've ever registered to vote, your Social Security number is not an identifier that is used in the voter database. And so there's a question of how are they matching people from the Social Security rolls who are there as non-citizens with someone with the same name who shows up on some states' voter rolls. And I will say this is something I have some personal experience with. My full name is Miguel Julian Sanchez. That's very common Spanish name. It's basically the same as Michael Smith or the equivalent of Michael Smith. And I've run into mismatch problems a lot. Coming back into the United States, I will be at least briefly detained because there is another Miguel Sanchez who is on some kind of watch list as a bad actor. Last time I had to renew my Washington, D.C. driver's license, I found myself in the Kafkaesque position of having to prove that I was not the same Miguel Sanchez, who, by the way, had my same birth date as a Miguel Sanchez in Chicago, who had some kind of criminal warrant out for his arrest and was not eligible for a driver's license. As a result of that, happily, I was able to do that and get a letter from the Secretary of State of Illinois saying, no, this is not the same Julian Sanchez. But it goes to show that this is not actually a pretty reliable way of figuring out whether two people with the same name are the same person. You might think, oh, the same birth date and the same name? What a coincidence. But, tens of thousands of babies are born in the United States every single day. And if you think about people with common names, it's not that implausible that a lot of those babies that are born every day are going to end up having the same name if it's a common name. And that this is an issue that is going to differentially affect different population subgroups. So, Sanchez is a very common Spanish name. If you think about South Korean migrants, I think more than a third of South Korean families have a surname that is some variant of Kim, Lee, or Park. And so, if your name happens to be John Lee or John Park, there's probably going to be quite a few of you born on any given day. This is also, I think, a kind of extension of a phenomenon we've seen previously where Elon Musk very vigorously promoted and repeatedly promoted the idea that they had found evidence of 150-year-olds collecting Social Security benefits. That was pretty decisively debunked. It just turned out he had a bunch of young guys looking through databases that they didn't understand the finer details of. These were not, in fact, people who were receiving benefits. That didn't stop Musk from making that claim again and again. I think it is extremely likely that we will discover that this claim is similarly on thin ground, but it is something that fits with a larger narrative that is very popular on right-wing media outlets, and so Gracias is making the rounds pushing it. Moving on from that, the initial pitch from Elon Musk when DOGE got up and running was that they hoped to save $2 trillion a year, an amount that I think most experts in the federal budget thought was just wildly unrealistic. At a recent cabinet meeting, Musk has apparently lowered his sights significantly, saying they expected that for their first year, DOGE would save about $150 billion. That's the current amount DOGE claims to have saved on their website, although even that amount, a lot of expert analysts have said is probably significantly inflated. There's just a whole slew of cases where they have posted claims to their wall of receipts about massive savings that were based on either a typo or a misunderstanding of how federal contracts work. So we will see if even the newly reduced figure of $150 billion in savings stands up to scrutiny. Stories from both the Daily Beast and Politico on whether we're starting to see a little bit of internal friction within the Trump administration and pushback against DOGE. Apparently, at the National Institutes of Health, within the Department of Health and Human Services, the director sent around an email to staff telling them effectively they could begin disregarding instructions from DOGE, including instructions to report on their weekly or daily achievements and instructions about limits on agency credit card spending. This is something we've seen kind of crop up periodically. A lot of folks who are the confirmed heads of their agencies do not particularly think that they ought to be taking orders from DOGE, which is we're not elected or confirmed body of people. And so there's going to be, I think, a test going forward of to what extent DOGE is really still in the driver's seat. We've also seen senior staff at a lot of agencies fired for pushing against things that DOGE wanted to accomplish. Ultimately, the pattern in these cases is always it depends to what extent the president is willing to back DOGE as against the leadership of the agencies where DOGE is trying to exert influence. At NIH, apparently, at least for the moment, they felt empowered to say, no, this is our territory. We're going to run the show here. We will see whether they're able to maintain that defiance. DOGE has also announced additional layoffs at the Technology Transformation Services at GSA, the General Services Administration. Apparently, about 120 people so far have been announced to be laid off from a workforce of about 691, with the ultimate goal being to cut that workforce in half. This comes on the heels of the gutting of other government technology agencies, 18F and the U.S. Digital Service, where DOGE is now formally housed. It really does seem like effectively what's going on here is that sources of technical expertise other than DOGE itself are being hollowed out. In many cases, it seems like because technical experts will often raise objections to the kind of database access and database consolidation that has been a kind of hallmark of DOGE's mission. So keep an eye on that. From Reuters, we have news that DOGE is now installed with its own team at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, a major bank regulator. In contrast to most of the other places where DOGE has been installed, it's worth noting that the FDIC is funded by premiums paid by the banks themselves and not by tax revenues. So there's less of an urgency there in terms of making cuts with the aim of saving tax dollars. We just should keep an eye on that and see what DOGE gets up to at FDIC. House Republicans moved forward following suit from earlier action by the Senate to pass a bill that would remove authority from the now kind of moribund Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to regulate electronic payment systems, digital payment applications like Cash App and Venmo. This is significant from a sort of conflict of interest perspective because Elon Musk has announced that he plans to soon launch X Money, a digital payment service integrated with the former Twitter, now X. And so regulatory authority for over that has been removed from the CFPB, which of course at this point has been reduced to such a sort of skeleton crew that it's not clear that they would be in a position to do all that much regulating in any event. Senate Democrats are demanding answers from DOGE as to why it has sought access to the Federal Parent Locator Service, a child support database maintained by the Department of Health and Human Services. This is a collection of, frankly, quite sensitive and intimate information about families. And there's a concern expressed by the senators who sent a letter demanding an explanation of DOGE's access, that it may be an effort to effectively gain access to the types of personal information that exist in other federal databases that DOGE has been blocked access to either by pushback from the agencies themselves or by orders from the courts saying, no, this is outside the bounds of what's permissible under federal privacy law. A report in FedScoop says that the Government Accountability Office, which is a kind of Congress's sort of investigative agency, says it is now hearing back from DOGE after having very little contact in the initial months. As we mentioned in a previous roundup, GAO is now conducting a probe into DOGE's access to federal systems to see whether they are in accord with best practices and, of course, federal privacy law. So apparently that cooperation has begun, and at least there's an initial response that they are getting that has been positive, and that DOGE is open to hearing and implementing their recommendations. Although, again, one of the sort of oddities of DOGE from the get-go has been that we have a number of entities within the federal government, the offices of the Inspector General, the Government Accountability Office, among several others, that kind of have the same mission as DOGE, and there appears to have been, to this point, fairly minimal cooperation between them. Reported Newsweek says that Trump has told his inner circle that he is hoping to keep DOGE staffers on for the long haul, even after Elon Musk departs. So DOGE staff have been installed in agencies throughout the federal government, even once the kind of formal project of DOGE winds down, even after Elon Musk has returned to his businesses. We may see that network of DOGE alumni, if you will, kind of persist as a group that exists across different agencies within the federal government. One might even think of it as a kind of deep state. From Politico, we see news that the Trump administration has effectively cut off support for a major annual climate study, study of the assessment of the impacts of climate change. That's essentially been zeroed out by NASA and also by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This is sort of significant because this provides annual reports on what the impacts and costs of climate change are. This has been viewed in many cases as something that's sort of hostile to business. These are conclusions that end up being used to support more environmental regulation. And so it seems like basically the solution is we will stop hearing about those harms, even though this is a study that is mandated by Congress. Finally, turning to the military, one of the striking things about DOGE is that though it has ambitious goals in terms of cutting federal spending, it has mostly been tinkering at the edges of spending areas that account for a pretty small percentage of the federal budget. So we've been hearing about lots of layoffs of the workforce. The federal sort of payroll is a minuscule fraction of federal outlays. If you really want to make a dent in government spending, you need to look at entitlements and health spending, which we're seeing some of, and defense. And it seems like finally DOGE is starting to play a role in looking at military spending. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced that the Pentagon would be ending $5 billion in contracts identified as wasteful by DOGE, including with firms like Accenture and Deloitte. These are a combination of consulting and IT contracts. So whether those are smart cuts or not will remain to be seen, but we are beginning to see more significant areas of government spending come under the DOGE spotlight. Also, an executive order this week will have DOGE reviewing the Navy. So perhaps Donald Trump can stop playing YMCA at his rallies and now bring Elon Musk on to play in the Navy. That is the news roundup for Friday, April 11th, 2025. Stay tuned, and we'll be back next week with more roundups, as well as a full-blown podcast episode where we speak with New York Times reporter Emily Badger about DOGE access to sensitive federal databases, as well as claims about the amount that DOGE is saving. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you soon.